Thank you.
Hello everyone. Thank you all for coming tonight. Welcome to the BBC interview at Sheffield DocFest. I'm Jack Bootle, Head of Specialist Factual Commissioning at the BBC, and I'm delighted to welcome here today a man who has a very long CV. He has presented more than 100 TV programmes. He's been to more than 130 countries. He's a former investigative reporter for the Sunday Times. He's a New York Times best-selling author. The Telegraph calls him the most well-travelled man on TV. The Mirror calls him the sexiest man on TV.
I don't think that's true.
There are over 30 Mumsnet forums dedicated to him. It's Simon Reeve.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello. Thank you. And hello, who's joining us on the stage is behind you.
Hello. So, Simon, thank you for coming. Today we are going to be discovering how Simon found his way into the TV industry, which is actually a more surprising story than I initially realised. We'll be reflecting on some highlights from his astonishing 20-year career, as well as a couple of lowlights, I think. We'll be trying to pinpoint the origin of his wanderlust, and we'll be asking, why is he so popular? Why are you so popular?
Right.
20 years after you first started on TV, why are you still going when so many people are?
Still here?
Yeah.
I like how you set that out at the start. You know, this is our plan for our time together. All right.
I could have said that before we got
That's
today,
good.
you know, but I like to keep you on your toes.
Toes, definitely.
But first, Simon. Oh wait, hang on. Bit of housekeeping. We're going to do Q&A at the end. So I know loads of you are going to be burning with questions.
Hopefully.
You can submit questions via the QR code, right? Or just hold them in your mind, and we'll send roving mics out at the end, and we'll take questions then. But first, Simon, we have something to celebrate.
We do.
Which is you've got a huge hit show on BBC Two. Congratulations.
We have, haven't we, Jack? Yes. I'm absolutely delighted. There's a few people here who've been involved, so well done to all of us, and to anyone who pays for their licence fee and has watched it. Thank you all.
3.9 million viewers. The highest
So what was that,
show,
sorry?
It's 3.9 million, which makes it the highest rating show in any genre on BBC Two for 2 years. So that's higher than The Hootenanny, that's higher than Gone Fishing, higher than Trays Uncloaked. It's big. That must feel pretty good, right?
It feels amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's slightly hard for me to believe and comprehend, but obviously it's fantastic. And I feel slightly humbled and overprivileged about it, because I've been to parts of Britain where people stump up for these programmes, and I hope we're giving them what they want and deserve through them. But we haven't had that many complaints about the series, so that's a good thing. We've heard some good things from people, and we're going to do it again. Great.
We're going again. Yes, that was announced today. If it wasn't announced, you've just announced it. But we're going again for
We've just put it out via the press office. That was what we were doing with the social media collaborations. That was it, yeah. Good. That was what I was saying to you. How do you do this anyway?
So, Simon, in the series you explore 4 of the last great wilderness of the world.
Yeah.
That's Patagonia, the Congo, the Coral Triangle, and the Kalahari.
Yeah.
I know this is
checking how much
like,
you watched it.
I have actually watched it. This is kind of asking you to choose your favourite child, but if you had to pick a favourite wilderness, what would you say?
Oh, that is really... It's hard, but I don't know why it's sort of easy at the same time. The one that's leaping up in my head going, pick me, is the Congo. And I think that's partly because it was the first one we filmed. It was the first one in the series. And it really, really matters. It is a part of the planet that we do not know enough about. And I think that was the overall justification, if you like, for the series. To show people part of the planet they don't know, part of the planet that really is really important, and to remind people that these wilderness areas still exist on a planet that we as a species have inflicted such damage on. But there are still parts of the world out there worth believing in, worth fighting for, and that was all part of what we wanted to do with the series.
We actually have a little clip of the show to play. It's a little glimpse of the pre-title. So why don't we run the clip now?
Thank you.
So looking at that, you look like a man very much in your element. You look like you're enjoying it. I mean, maybe there are moments where you're not enjoying it that much, like when you're dangling over a crevasse, but you do look like someone who was born to be a traveller.
Right.
And I think if you actually go back in time to your childhood and your younger days, I think your choice of career now actually seems quite surprising, because you're not really from that background. I mean, you never did a gap year, you never went interrailing, your family didn't even take foreign holidays when you were a kid, right?
No, but not, you're right, not didn't even. Most people didn't. You know, we weren't unusual. It was very normal. I grew up in a very ordinary part of West London. People didn't go on fancy foreign holidays when I was a lad. And I know, people look at me now and they think, oh, it's another public school boy on the telly. And I understand why they think that. And a lot of it, I'm sure, is not just the voice, but the hair. The hair makes people think I must be. But that is, people always think I must have gone to the finest school and then gone to the best university and got a really magnificent degree. And for a long time I just went along with that and thought, well, if that's what you want to think, then great. But that's not my story. My background is very ordinary family, very ordinary area of West London that I come from. And I didn't get on a plane until I was an adult. We didn't go on fancy foreign holidays. I think I had a very normal upbringing. I didn't know people in the media at all. Nobody in my family has ever been to university, so no pressure on my little lad. I don't come from obvious privilege in some ways, but of course I am white and male. And my probably biggest luck was the fact that I was brought up in London. So geographically, I was really fortunate to grow up on the edge of the media hub that is London. I wasn't connected to it in any way at all, but it was possible for me to get into the media because I had a home that I could return to, and I had friends who I could then couch surf and stay with, etc. in London. But I don't come from the standard background of a telepresenter, but I'm not entirely sure what it is. There is no telepresenter school, is there? I started out in journalism and almost as a cub reporter. In many ways that was a decent way of picking up the skills necessary to go on some of the journeys.
Well, let's go back to your childhood. Where did you go?
Take me back.
Where did you go?
Yeah. We would go semi-religiously every year we did the same thing. We went to Studland Beach in Studland Bay. Is anyone familiar in Dorset? Okay, a bit further, a hand or two going up. All right, it's a long way. It's in the south, I grant you.
Very nice.
It's very nice. I think Studland Beach is one of the finest beaches on planet Earth. Absolutely. But my dad,
it's a nudist beach, isn't it?
It's got a bit that's nudist, and I am personally intrigued, and I hope somebody from a tabloid reporter may well be that you know of that, because not many people do. But we didn't go to that bit, although my dad sometimes would when he wanted to get everything brown. But we would go and stay in Wareham in Dorset. We went and stayed in the same house. This is long before Airbnb. My dad had seen an advert I think in our little Methodist church magazine from somebody who owned this little cottage. They only placed the adverts once in one edition, but the price they were charging was so low that we went back year after year and block booked it. This was before people discovered how much money they could make from second homes and Airbnb. So it was brilliant. It was like a little second home for us.
So the fact that you didn't really travel as a kid, do you think that means that you still don't take it for granted now?
I do, in truth.
You do take it for granted?
No, I do think that's why I don't take it for granted. I'm glad that was clarified.
Check that.
No, I think you're right. I think that is why. I think it's one of the aspects of almost my psychology that I'm actually a little bit proud of. that's still on these journeys. I genuinely don't think I've got a right to do this anyway. And I do still think, oh my goodness, we are lucky to be hacking our way through the Congolese jungle. And I work with people who feel the same way. That's really, really important to me. And over the years, not everybody has. For example, some people inevitably in a poncy industry like the media, they might sometimes get a little bit tiny little bit pretentious about it, but they haven't lasted. The people who work on the programme now, I think for anyone who isn't Italian pays for them, I think we've got the team that you would want working on them in terms of their commitment and belief. And it's really important that nobody thinks they've got it right. It's a privilege to be making these programmes, and it's a responsibility as well to be going away on the licence fee in somebody in Edinburgh or Exeter. That is an incredible thing to be allowed to do. I think yes, the fact I didn't as a lad means I know what an absolute honour it is to now.
You do seem to have such a sort of charmed life now, and you're such a charming presence. I think it might surprise people to learn that you really weren't always like this, right? And your teenage years were, I guess, I want to use the phrase, marked by criminality, right? They were kind of sketchy, and that criminality ranged from stealing Kinder Eggs all the way through to knife crime, right?
That is detail you've got there. Where the hell did I say that?
I've read your book.
Oh my goodness. Yes, okay, the Kinder Egg, not the... Okay. Yeah, so, all right. I was a naughty lad, definitely. Criminality is obviously pushing it a bit far, Jack, but it is true. I was a very naughty boy from quite young. And it is true. Don't be shocked by this. I want to take it seriously because it did go to greater levels than I've probably readily admitted, but it's all hopefully grown-ups in the audience and an understanding, sympathetic audience as well. So I was, I think, looking for excitement and experiences. This is a long time ago, let's remember. And I'd be hanging out with a little BMX gang and we'd be causing trouble. I could make petrol bombs by the time I was 12, and I was very, very good at thieving and shoplifting at that sort of age. And I did some very, very naughty things. And I think, I've confessed, i.e. through autobiography, like any C-level tally person, they write an autobiography, don't they? I think I've confessed to some of them in that. But seriously, yes, I carried a knife, for example. I was one of those kids.
And that's more than just a little bit naughty.
Yes, it is indeed. Although it felt like, it didn't feel so horrifically criminal then, as I think it should, looking back now with hindsight, and as an adult hearing what happens. And yet, even at the time, there were kids in my wider orbit I knew who'd been stabbed. But still, I was scared, in truth. I think people underestimate that aspect of the situation in terms of knife crime in Britain now. I was a frightened young lad. I was growing up on the edge of inner city London. I was threatened, mugged, robbed, chased, followed, beaten up. I bought a Rambo knife and I carried it to and from school, partly as protection. And I'm not ashamed of that, but I do think that situation, that aspect is worth understanding, that sometimes it's because these kids are genuinely scared. It's a scary time of life to be a boy wearing an identifying uniform, walking the street to and from your school on your own. I was always frightened of being beaten up or worse, as happened to people I knew.
And how were things at home? Was home a haven from all of that?
No, home was not a haven. We weren't brilliant at communicating and in our relationships at home. So my dad was a teacher. He was about the last teacher in Britain, I think, who didn't have a degree. But he was a hard grafting bloke from rural poverty who made it to become a maths teacher, could never become more than he could never become a deputy head of department or anything like that because he didn't have a degree, and I think that grated with him a bit. He was a tough bloke and he worked in the toughest school, one of the toughest schools in London, at one of the toughest times to be a teacher. And I think he both my parents are only children, and both their Both their fathers had died young, so they were both both only children who grew up in single-parent households, effectively. I think we weren't great. They hadn't had the experiences in how to communicate in families as a result. And, you know, my mum's home still bears the scars from where I put my foot through walls and doors as I was growing up as a stroppy, troubled teenage boy.
And you actually were sent for counselling, I think, when you were a teenager.
I was, yeah, that was, when I was, my criminality period, as it were, then morphed into quite profound head health problems. I really struggled with my mental health when I was in my mid-teens. 14, that it started to go wrong. 15, I was really having problems. I had a lot of, I mean, think back, I'm talking many centuries ago. You can imagine how underfunded and non-existent mental health counselling for youngsters was. But I got it. Yes, I got it. You know, people were really worried about me. And it was quite a depressing thing to do. I can still remember sitting in those grey rooms, and I had one counsellor who was in tears with me at one point, and I had to it was terrible, and try and help them, and I was in such a bad way. School was a problem for me, confidence, which I look back on now, wryly to a certain extent, but sympathetically as well. I was a really troubled lad, and I had it really with bells on, in truth. And I had no confidence in life. I was frightened of everything, and I was hopeless and uninspired and uninspiring at school. And nothing worked, and then it came to doing exams, and I was lost. I really was. And I sat down to do the first exam, and I can so, honest to God, remember, God, I can really feel it every time I'm taken back. And I don't mind it, but I can still totally connect to that teenager so many decades ago. I can remember being there and the overwhelming fear and that terror. And I remember turning the page in a sitting in the exam hall. Oh my God. And I was just overwhelmed by this panic and fear. And I don't mind talking about it genuinely. I got up, I walked out of the exam hall, and I never went back. I flunked out of school without any qualifications at all. And I spiraled down into a very dark place.
So the next 2 years are dark for you, aren't they? Your mental health is probably at its lowest point when you leave school.
Yeah, they were. I went into a very bad place. I did. I was totally lost. I had no qualifications, I had no ambitions, I had no job, no girlfriend. And we're terrible in this country. It is one of our great scandals still, how appallingly we counsel and help and shape those youngsters who don't fit into the traditional mould of school to a job, or school to college, or school to university. We're very bad at understanding, helping, and harnessing what can be a talent. We just let it wither, and we're happy to have 100,000 families who are in desperate need of love and parental guidance and help and involvement. Still. And, I needed that, and I didn't really get it, and I floundered and was a little lost lamb. And it went very dark for me, in truth. I found myself on the edge of a bridge, and it's kind of luck, that I'm still here today. I stepped back, I changed my mind, I was frightened of the possibilities that stepping off involved, and I went home, I cried myself to sleep most nights, and eventually I signed myself on the dole. I was terrified of that, and I got some good advice. I got a little bit of money from the state, the welfare state working as it should, I like to think. I went on a couple of very tiny adventures that were enormous for me, that helped to grow my physical confidence, and I started applying for jobs.
So tell me a little bit about those adventures, because that's almost your first taste of travel, isn't it?
In a way. Yeah.
Is that? But do you put that down? That is somehow attached to that moment, to a turning point for your mental health, right? That kind of first experience of travel.
There was the turning point for me, if there was a single moment, and I could pin one, but it really is incremental, as it is for so many people. I think for me a turning point where I saw a little bit of hope, if you like, a big one was I went on this bonkers, daft little adventure where I thought I'm going to go to Scotland. And, this was a massive thing for me as, 16 or maybe 16, maybe nearly 17. I'd never really been out of London on my own, I don't think. But I got this great advice from the woman who signed me on in the job centre, in the DHS, wherever it was at the time. And I said to her, I don't have a plan. And she said, don't have a plan. Just take things step by step. And that was so profound for me. And I really took that, and it really meant something to me. And I thought, okay, what does it mean? It means don't look all the way over there. Don't think about how you're going to get to the top of a mountain, but just think how you can get to there, the end of your road. Or in my case, out of bed and out of your bedroom, And that was, I did everything step by step, okay? And I'm going to go to Scotland. And there's no real reason for it. I don't have fantastic heritage or ancestry. I'm ashamed to admit. It's because my mate Dwight had a video copy of Highlander that we watched multiple times. Yeah. I thought, I'm going to go to Scotland. I love this. I'm going to go there. I went to Scotland, doing it all very much step by step. I went to Glencoe, and I went up in Glencoe. No reason, just ambling around. I was one of these muppets, really, who's often lifted off by mountain rescue when they've got hopelessly lost. Worse things could have happened, terrible things could have happened. I'm sorry if I'm going too fast, apology. I'm trying to condense it all down, we're talking about a life after all. And I just kept going up. And that genuinely really helped me, because I made it to the top of the Lost Valley in Glencoe, as I later discovered, and I sat there in darkness on my own. And I did feel a bit reborn, and we totally undervalue the importance of natural experiences and adventures in the big world for our youngsters now who are experiencing head health problems. In my view, based on my little experiences. Not for everyone, but it's something that worked for me. And that really helped to transform me, because physically, oh my goodness, I felt I could do something.
So another turning point for you comes when you're, I think, 17 or 18, and you join the Sunday Times as a postboy.
Yes.
And that's a pivotal moment.
Totally. Yeah. I feel a bit bad having my side to you over here. Sorry, but so I got a job work. My first proper job was, I had other jobs for some embarrassing. I worked in H. Samuel the Jewellers in Oxford Circus for one day because I was sacked for taking the keys to the safe home. Not good. I went for a job as a white van driver on Wembley Stadium trading estate, and I had to walk there because I didn't have enough money for a bus fare, and I didn't get the job even though I was the only person who applied. I've had those moments, so that's part of why I don't take this for granted now, and I pinch myself, Jack, I do, I really do. But I got a job working in the post room of the Sunday Times, yes, and I didn't get it because a relative helped me, as is often the cliche and the stereotype. No, I just applied. Andrew Neil apparently caught a group of the postboys smoking weed when he wanted them to take a package somewhere, and they'd all left the premises, and he brought in some new postboys, and I was one of them. And I saw the door of life's opportunities, if you like, open just a tiny bit then. And I took every chance I could get. But my mum had to go with me on the tube the first week to make sure I got there, because I was physically sick when I started there each morning, and I was a bag of nerves. But I did it, and I kept it. And even after a few weeks, I discovered that I was volunteering there. Everyone was so nice. Everyone was so lovely and welcoming there. It was bizarre. It was a very friendly workplace. The adult world generally is. And that transformed me.
And so you moved from being a postboy to the investigations team.
I didn't move, and it wasn't quite that dramatic a transformation, but I worked with and I worked for. So I was very young, and I was a blank canvas, really, and blank canvas. I was a bit of a sponge as well, to mix the metaphors up. I was just like a little goldfish, going around with my wide eyes. Oh my goodness, grown-ups working here. I just loved it. Every day was new, and I was so happy to do anything there. I hadn't spent 8 years doing 2 degrees. I didn't come with a sense of entitlement or anything. I had a job. Jack, that was a massive thing for me. I was totally happy to do all the photocopying, sort the post at 6 a.m. I loved it. I'd whistle away to myself. You know, I had a proper niche I developed there. I was the only one who could fix these A1 size photocopiers. I'll tell you, anyone who's got any, you've got to find your niche, your specialist skill that no one else knows, like knowing where the key to the stationery cupboard is. That means you're unsackable, basically. I was the only one who could work these critical photocopiers, and I'm serious. I honestly don't think I would have got, if that was really key to my little ongoing career.
But how did you go from working the photocopier to doing jobs for the investigations?
You work before an era of risk assessments and health and safety, and you say yes when people ask you to do absolutely ridiculous things which you've got zero training for. When somebody says, will you go to this bombing / riot / find these terrorists, you go, yes, no problem, I'll go and do that. And you know what, I actually did. And so, very rapidly, my world started to change. That didn't happen in the first few weeks, but it did happen indecently quickly, in a way that would mean totally I could have had them for a lawsuit, let alone an industrial tribunal if it happened now. I'm absolutely sure. But look, I got opportunities as a result. And opportunities gave me confidence and experiences, and that developed resilience within me. I say this, I'm disconnected from the person I was at this time. I do think it's still interesting, despite, if you can forgive me talking about myself like this, I think it's incredible. I went from being, within 2 years, a terrified, suicidal teenager, to being the youngest staff writer in the history of Times newspapers. That is how much possibility we lose as a nation by failing to love and support and shepherd some of our youngsters of either gender and any who don't fit that traditional mould that we apply where sits whoever. Thank you. We've said, just go to university, you know. So yeah, and that happened because I said yes, and I was not, and I talked to people, and I volunteered, and I said, do you want me to get you a prawn sandwich? Do you want me to go and do some photocopying for you? This really what was going on. And then they said, could you do this bit of research? Can you go and make this phone call for us? Can you go and find this out? Pre-internet, man. You know, you have to go or ring or speak.
So by the early 90s, you're working as an investigative journalist, and you start to become interested in a man who, at that point, nobody has really heard of, and that's Osama bin Laden.
Yeah.
And that interest actually goes on to really shape the course of your career, I'd say.
Yeah, so in fairness, it's impeccable research. It wasn't him then. It was a bit later. Just because there might be an eminent
who actually knows.
Yeah, knows their stuff. But respect for the audience.
That did open up a whole new chapter in your life.
It totally did. Yeah, so I was a writer on the Sunday Times. I was obviously very junior. And even when I was the deputy night editor at 19, and I still had people coming up to me who wondered why on earth I was sitting on the news desk, and they'd say, can you take this package to Gate 6? And I'd say, I'm actually just editing the front page. I mean, it was just mad. But that was a workplace of opportunity, seriously, for all, whatever you think of him. That I owe a little career to Andrew Neil and the meritocratic environment he created. Anyway, 1993, there's an attack on the World Trade Center in New York. 1993. And it was a massive terrorist attack at the time. And I'd done a lot of research investigating various different terrorist groups at that point. I'd worked on investigation into nuclear smuggling, arms dealing, I'd worked undercover, I'd led surveillance on arms dealers, other ridiculous things, way too young, with totally inadequate safeguards in place, but it was bloody brilliant. And then 1993, there's this attack on the World Trade Center. I start studying that the same day it happens. And at the age of 20, can you believe, I had this mad idea that I could write a book about that attack and the investigation and aftermath. And I can't believe it looking back, I really can't. But, I'd already been working for a few years by then. I was writing, at that age, you're a churning wheel of possibility. And I just thought, yes, I was writing 3,000 word pieces for the Sunday Times occasionally. It felt like a stretch, but impossible to write a book. I went trawling around agents to find one. I found some of the letters of rejection the other day at the back of my writing cabinet. And I got them out to show my lad. To show, look at this, no thank you, no thank you, no thank you. So you've got to have those failures. If you haven't got those failures, you haven't been trying. Scores of them. I tried so hard to find an agent even. But then, yes, he believed in me. I'm still with them. It's the longest relationship of my life from Midway's out to my immediate family. And I started researching this book about the World Trade Center attack. And over 5 years and many, many adventures, it evolved to become, it came out in 1998, the first book in the world on Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda.
And so when 9/11 actually happened,
yes,
the media are sort of casting about for an expert on the subject, and you're sort of the only one.
Yes.
So that kind of, that then...
Yeah, there were very few, in truth. So, it's, again, looking back, it feels absolutely bizarre. So my book came out in 1998, and it warned of a new age of apocalyptic terrorism. And, of course, nobody read it, nobody took any notice. My parents went around bookshops, moving it from the shelves at the back, placing it at the front. Nobody, I was surprised, really, because I really thought this was a message, but of course it's just another book, really. And then I worked on other books about equally joyous subjects, biological warfare. I wrote another book about the Munich Olympics massacre, which was made into a Oscar-winning, it worked in parallel with an Oscar-winning feature documentary that's probably on here many years ago. Oh, and lots of other adventures and books and so on. So, but I was totally, obscure author. Before the second tower is hit on 9/11, my phone started ringing off the hook. And it didn't stop really for a year and a half. There were satellite trucks parked up outside my flat before the end of day one. And a Brazilian and Russian TV crew tried to doorstep me at a flat that I used to live in. It was completely mad. And of course, yes, I was thrust onto the TV to talk about what had happened. I was one of a few people out there I'd written a book. I was an author. That gives a lot of sometimes spurious, sometimes genuine credibility. And, although nobody knew my inadequate, pathetic background, the author tag and the fact I had my own hair and teeth and was young, I'm pushed onto TV to talk about it.
So it's your first taste of fame, I suppose. And not too long after that, you were asked to present Holidays in the Danger Zone, which comes out in 2003,
yeah.
And so that was a series shown originally on BBC 4. And we've actually got a clip from that show. And this, I believe, Simon, you can correct me if this is wrong, this is the first thing you ever filmed, the first time you were ever on camera, other than being on Rolling News.
All right.
So, shall we
see how we did?
It's a clip of you in Kazakhstan,
right,
visiting a laboratory where they create biological weapons. So let's see how we did. Let's run the clip.
Oh, thank you.
So that was the first thing you ever shot, right?
That was day one of us filming that series, yes. And so I started making that, working on that, as it were. Yeah, I was chatting with telly people about making TV programs, and I was interested in Central Asia, and the Beeb folk then were interested in Central Asia. And it's weird for me to see that. I'm looking at it quite closely because it's not like quite good quality copy, actually. The one I've got is really low quality, and I look back on that, and it's very nice to hear people smiling and laughing at it. It's weird for me because I find myself just as annoying then as I am now. I don't know how people have put up with me. And just between us, I confess, when I first started watching not watching, I never would want to watch myself on TV, but watching the rushes and the edits and so on. And I remember watching that first programme and seeing myself and thinking, oh my goodness. I rang up my brother James and I said, mate, I'm so sorry. All those little quirks of yours that have slightly annoyed me over the decades about you, I do them all as well. I'm really sorry.
So I'm going to play another clip actually, so I'm going to have two in quick succession.
All right.
So quite shortly after Holidays in the Danger Zone, you go on to make Places That Don't Exist. That's 2005, and that's a series that sees you exploring countries whose existence is contested. Rogue states, pariah states, breakaway states.
Well put. Countries that aren't officially countries, yeah. It's a fascinating aspect of planet Earth we don't know enough about. Yeah.
Fascinating. A great series.
Yeah.
And the reason I want to play this clip is I just think you're very charming.
Do you?
And it's a clip in which you're in Somalia and you're meeting a man called Mr. Big Beard. So
I love him.
Let's take a look.
Thank you. It's a hell of a situation we were in there. It really was. But yeah, that still ranks right up there for bizarre encounters and experiences in life. And yeah, so I got a Somali diplomatic passport in my own name, my own photo, from a man called Mr. Big Beard. I mean, who can? I remember that. I remember every bit of that, and the guy who was there at Juice. I remember the guards. You know, we were 12 heavily armed, stoned local mercenaries with 2-pack on the main gun. Oh my God, that was one of the trickiest things we've done.
And yet you're so sweet.
What the hell could you do? You know, that has to be your only protection, to be as harmless and gormless as possible, which unsurprisingly comes naturally to me. You know, we've sometimes taken sort of bullet-headed guards with us. People can sense that they're trouble, and I don't look like trouble. I'm tall, obviously we're foreign, we're outsiders, but I don't pose an obvious physical threat. I think that probably helps a little bit. I look back at that first walking into that plague research centre in Kazakhstan. I mean, I don't know, there's probably some telling people here, maybe people who are setting out. For me, that was the best situation for me to start, because I remember we got out of the car to start filming there, and I was with Will Dawes, who's still in telly, and he was filming he was shot by him. He was shooting producer-director, as we would say, and he was a bit wobbly on the camera, but I got out of the car and I looked at him and I was sort of saying, so what are we going to do? I was an author, this wasn't my world, and he just said, well, go on then. And that was it. And that's really the key direction I've had in my little telly career, quite frankly. And I was like, oh, okay, it's like that, is it? I just walked in, and that's been, I suppose, what I've clung to in the decades since. I go in first, and the camera and the viewers hopefully come with me. And what an amazing thing that is to do.
I think you have a knack for seeming to be at ease in almost any situation. But of course, you've been in some extremely dangerous situations, Somalia being one. Can you tell us about some of the hairiest situations you've been in? I mean, there must have been times when you thought, oh, I've actually pushed it a bit too far this time.
Jonathan? Jonathan, are you in here? Yeah, what would you say, mate? I think the drug den. All right. This is Jonathan Young, who's here. Thank you. Who is local, Sheffield born and bred, and oh my God, doesn't he let me know it, all right? And we filmed a lot together over the years. I have filmed with, he's not the only magnificent camera DOP that I've filmed with, but in many tricky situations with Jonathan. The one that springs to mind when you say that, Jack, is with Jonathan when it wasn't the most dangerous, but it was a situation which still lingers with me, because we were in a township in South Africa. We were starting a journey travelling around the Indian Ocean, still available on iPlayer, I do believe, if you're able to have a look. And we are in a township, we're sort of investigating a strange new drug. and we're talking to people in the township, and they literally said you should go and talk to the crazy guy down the street. And for some reason I thought, that's a great idea, let's go and do that. And so there's me, I said, come on guys, let's go. This is my memory of it anyway, Jonathan. So Jonathan's on the camera, Andrew as well, who's the PD, the director in that situation. Come on, I say, in we go, and we walk in with a couple of other locals who are shepherding us and hopefully protecting us. And as we walk into this bloke's house, I'm at the front. We haven't had anyone go in before. There's a dynamic risk assessment. There wasn't really. We go in. We haven't got any guards or real security with us. I see somebody passed out on the side. It's very dark. And I realise, oh my God, I've led the guys into a drug den. And then I start to think, oh my goodness. Jonathan's got his eyes glued, he's got his eye glued to the camera, which he's looking through, he's looking in black and white as well, for goodness sake. I'm at the front. Andrew's trying to prevent Jonathan falling over anything and doing a bit of sound. But I'm out there at the front as the point man in a small team walking into a drug den where they don't know we're coming. And we've got a large broadcast camera we're bringing into their world. And that was a very worrying moment for me, particularly, I sit down and you can see it now. I look as gormless as ever sitting there with him. Bloke pulls out a gun and says, this is if people don't try and take our stash and don't pay. And I'm thinking, this could end very badly. It's time to leave. Thanks for having us. We're off now. And we've been a hasty retreat in best journalistic fashion. But it is one thing, it is an experience that I think, I'm glad it isn't shown on hostile environment courses about what not to do. But it was basically what not to do.
And in 2006, I think, you are filming in Gabon.
Yeah.
And you actually catch malaria. And I think,
as you do.
I think quite a lot of people in the UK don't necessarily take malaria terribly seriously, but this actually was a very serious illness, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, it's absolutely, and it still is for tens of millions of people on the planet. You're absolutely right. We don't rate it because we don't get it. Because in Europe, it's been effectively wiped out by clearing swamps and careful management. And now it affects mainly people in Africa, and there's not much money in a cure or treatment. So we've inadequately investigated and resourced it, which is a scandal. And it's absolutely, in my mind, one of the problems that holds a lot of lower income countries back. I remember when I discovered that in some areas in sub-Saharan Africa, you can get countries where there is, and regions where there's more than 100% incidence of malaria. How the hell is that possible? Because people get it more than once a year. I mean, how can you run an effective state when you've got such a debilitating, destructive disease? And yeah, I had it, it nearly killed me. I was a white TV presenter with backup. Luckily, we were in a place where they could get an experimental new drug to me. But I remember being on the phone to my wife and she was saying, they're going to give me this drug. And she was reading something she was looking up or research, early internet. And she said, it says the Third World War will break out in your body in a few hours. But take it, Simon, take it. And I sort of semi-passed out, but they were able to get it into me. And yeah, it was awful. I've never felt the same since, but I did survive.
Is that right? Does it linger?
Well, I was really laid low. And in a sort of long, illnessy, parasitical, virusy way, it was awful. And I struggled for a long time. I had a rehab and so on, and I got up and I went back on the journey. But I think it's a little bit like passing key decades in life. Yeah. You always say, it's never the same as it was.
You feel shit anyway.
Yes.
But look, so it didn't stop you. You kept travelling. And actually, I want to talk about Burma, which is one of my favourite series of yours.
Yeah.
And I think that is probably the series where I felt you were most at risk. So this is a series where Simon...
In Burma, or because Jonathan and I, we filmed going into Burma.
Going into Burma.
Yeah, when we travelled around the Tropic of Cancer, which, that's sweaty palm moment.
We've got a clip of that.
Thank you.
Shall we?
Hopefully not triggering for me or Jonathan.
No, let's have a look. This is...
I think I suggested it, so it's fine.
You've just crossed the border into Burma to visit a Shin village to document the oppression they suffer at the hands of the Burmese military, and suddenly you're warned that a Burmese military patrol is on the way.
Thank you.
keep in touch with any of the people you meet in your travels?
It's very hard. Cheery, who is my guide there, we actually went back and we saw her a few years later when we filmed a specific couple of programs about Burma. Generally I would say it's hard, verging on impossible. And, we spend a little bit of time with people who are sometimes guides or journalists, and we're one of many foreign telly teams that come through their part of the planet. Hopefully we have more of a connection, but I wouldn't want to presume that we're special to them. But where possible, it's hard enough keeping in touch with the people I'm actually making the programs with, in truth. It's interesting seeing that, and I think if I may draw something out for the audience here who aren't in, whether they're in telly or not, I think that's probably a clip that I would use to illustrate how brilliant the Beeb was, and I think still is actually, about their tolerance for risk, and for us making programs taking risks. Because I think probably as a Brit, and as quite a proud, in some ways, proud Brit, the Beeb, I'm very protective of the Beeb as an entity and as national glue, and I think I'm quite sick of the kicking it gets from entities and organisations who have no spine for anything like that themselves. This is the Beeb as an entity taking a massive risk to send people on what I know. Forgive me, I know through life what we did. It was quite special forces-y, and if we'd got injured or killed, Beeb people would have been hauled through courts over it. And that's impressive risk-taking by people back at base, as well as, us doing it because we believed in it. It's interesting, it's a slightly brilliantly truncated... Oh, thank you. Cheers. But the Beeb, I can never remember where it really still is, it's its own insurer. And that actually has been very key to making a lot of the programs I've made over the years. It means they're not beholden to what somebody in a back office at Lloyd's decides is acceptable for us to do. And I've always been really super impressed that there's been a grown-up discussion about what we can do, but there's very rarely a sort of, I don't know about that. No, it's always how can we make it possible? What we did there was bloody risky, in truth. And there was a point where I turned the camera around on Jonathan and Andrew, who I was with, and showed them as well in that situation. And I remember it very, very clearly. I'm very proud of what we did there and why we did it. I think it was telly with a bit of purpose, really, into a glossy travelogue, hopefully, or a glossy-ish travelogue, incorporating stories that you would never find otherwise. Of lives along a random-ish line like the Tropic of Cancer, the northern border of the tropics. So, it's a good thing to see back there. And one of genuinely the most terrifying moments of my life, when I thought there at the end there were the noises, and I thought we'd been caught by the Burmese military. And Cheery, who we were with, was on a death list, and God only knows what would have happened. But that was serious stakes, and I know and have met Special Forces guys who I've laughed and joked with about what we did without weapons, going into that behind enemy lines. It probably was.
So you take great risks again and again.
Carefully, yeah.
Carefully. And a difficult question. Do you ever feel as if you're exploiting the people you meet? You sort of fly in, you tell their story, you fly away on a jolly adventure.
Yeah.
How do you sort of work?
Oh my God, it is a toughie. You've got to limit me down if we're going to get any other answers now after this one. I can feel it's quite a parasitical arrangement where we turn up, we take their story. That's a brilliant example, really, because where we've been to see the Chin people, and we had a lot of questions about whether what we were doing was justifiable. They didn't really understand TV and what it might mean. We tried to explain it to people in advance. In that clip, you don't see the conversations we have with them where they tell us what happens to them. But we did, and we do damn care about the impact on them, and it was explained to people. almost always, even when people know what the consequences could be, they still want to be involved because they have a fundamental desire to have their story heard by you, by us. It's a very human thing. People want to know that somebody out there knows, and hopefully they will care. So it's not us they're telling, it's you. They get that. And I think that's been the case forever for us as a species, for goodness sake. It's an ancient, old trade almost. Stories are told to outsiders. We're conscious of the risk of taking people's stories. I always warn them. I tend to say, it's just a ripple on a pond. It will probably never make a difference to you, but it might mean the Chin, the Kogi, your story here in Congo is known by wider people. Hopefully it makes a bit of difference. I say, don't do it if you don't want to. It's only telly. Generally, almost they want to. But people have been tortured because of us filming with them. And they've done it knowing that's possible. That's a heavy burden. So I and we and you, we need to know that what we're doing is justified and has an impact and response.
So, Simon, I think one of your hallmarks is that you don't appear to pass judgment. That's certainly how I feel when I watch you. I feel you're very open-minded, you appear non-judgmental, and by doing that you allow me the space to make my own judgment. Yeah. What do you do, though, when you actually come across something, an event, a person, a cultural trend that you genuinely don't like, that just doesn't sit right with you? You know, misogyny, child beating. I mean, how do you navigate?
Great one. That's a tricky one for a proper BBC person, senior as well, to start raising. Carefully, I would say. I am judgmental. I'm a very judgmental person, actually. I've been in journalism in whatever form. I'm just a jumped up journo, really. I've been super lucky and careful and work hard, and I like to come up with some balance, but I also work with a team who don't let me go off on a rant and tether me in many ways, and through argument and storytelling we hopefully find a relative degree of balance. But there is still, through the process of filming and editing and scripting, there is still judgment and bias that we have to be careful about incorporating to appropriate degrees, because totally we're taking our values and judgment to sometimes tricky places. What examples? Let's take a one we can relatively carefully use, I think, which would be child labour. For example, in Bangladesh, which we filmed, again, travelling around the topic of cancer, actually, most memorably for me, if not the viewers. But that was a tricky situation where we're confronted by kids working in a Dickensian awful glass factory, burns on arms, barefoot with broken glass everywhere in appalling conditions. What value and morality do we apply to that? Because we can get on our high horse, and we did, and then we filmed some of the older workers there who said, we started as kids, be careful how you judge this, be careful, because if they lose their jobs here, there's no safety net. They'll go out there on the streets and they'll do anything, in italics, to survive. And that's much worse than working even in a glass factory. There isn't the safety net to fall back on, and in fact, well-meaning American politicians had managed to get kids kicked out of garment factories in Bangladesh, which meant they were then working in battery factories with acid and glass factories. It's very difficult. Now, we don't want kids working in those situations. We want them educated and to have lives and families and a childhood. But in a situation with no safety net, you're dealing with very difficult situations there. So we try and, I think, deal with the reality, bring our external knowledge to a situation, try and incorporate counterintuitive aspects. Don't just drink the Kool-Aid, as it were, that is sometimes given to you by very well-meaning other outsiders and NGOs. I read endlessly about situations beforehand, as do the rest of the team, and we try and bring broader knowledge to situations. So I'll sometimes take 100,000 words of background information that I've culled from other reports, reporters, etc. to each leg of a journey that I'm doing. I'm endlessly reading stuff to try and get as much balance from an abundance of research, really. But I'd like to think we're not afraid to incorporate tricky things. It's kind of part of what I love about the journeys, these counterintuitive stories, but definitely it's difficult, but we must do them, and you must keep letting and forcing people to ask more difficult questions, because I actually don't think we do enough. We don't question conventional narratives, and we don't question in any way as a society or as a media difficult stories which we allow simplistic story narratives to be told about. Whew. Thank you. We've got a countdown.
I know.
We?
I mean, I could go on talking for another hour, but I don't think the DocFest we're thanked for that. We've got about 13 minutes left, so I think we're going to open up to some questions.
Brilliant.
And then we'll wrap up. Should we get some roving mics out? I know they're a bit...
Thanks all, by the way, for coming on a Friday evening. Thank you.
Some people are dashing for the exit slide when they've taken this as a...
I won't take that as personal.
Are there any questions? Any hands up? I struggle to see.
You don't have to. Jack's got more, hopefully.
I've got more.
But go on, don't feel you can't. Look, you're pointing at someone else. Hello! Gentlemen in... Well, we can't assume.
I can't see. But anyway, yeah, there's somebody over there.
Hunter in red. Hello, go for it. There's a mic coming from your left. Or just speak.
Simon,
hello.
Knowing now your checkered past, where did you pick up your wonderful grasp of the English language in your very personable manner?
Thanks, Dad. I appreciate that. I didn't mean from your age, just the PR support there. I don't know. You know, I had to reinvent myself very rapidly when I started working. I was a proper estuary English lad. I remember starting work at the newspaper, and I was a right, you know, God, I can't even do it now, but I still actually have slight problems saying some words because I can't hide from my origins. Milk. What else would you say, Sam? Stairs. Little is that's it. Little is how every atom in my being. Little is how I want to say it. You know, I had to posh myself up really when I started working, and I did, in truth. And I didn't do what people are so often told now, which is be yourself. Myself was an uneducated little scuzz bucket. That wasn't going to get me far, was it? So I put on a different voice and manner, and I tried to adapt to a new reality, which was working with a lot of people from Oxbridge and Ivy League, who were still welcoming nonetheless. I sat opposite, for a while, Annabel Heseltine. Lord Bethel had a job nearby. There were people who had the most ridiculously privileged backgrounds around me. They were all lovely, by the way, and very welcoming. But I had to fit in to a certain degree, not to a ridiculous one. I wasn't betraying my origins and pretending I was something I wasn't. But I recognised that I think I needed to be slightly chameleon-like to work in those environments and meet people that I was meeting. So I can deal with being with somebody who's in difficulty in a refugee camp in Greece, and I can be with the King of Saudi Arabia and deal with those situations hopefully relatively appropriately. But that comes, I think, from recognising, you know, I grew up in a ludicrously multicultural part of London. That definitely helped me. You know, I grew up in an area where I was experiencing every aspect of life, and then still, when I'm very young, I'm thrust into an environment with privileged but welcoming people, and that helped as well. So grasp and personableness, I'm really honest to God not, but I could just keep up the pretense for quite a long time while we're making the TV programmes. And also I'm very conscious as a presenter, I think Jonathan and other people here might say otherwise, but I'm very aware of the needs of the project, you know. I'm really laser focused, I hope, Jonathan, on what Jonathan is getting on camera, where I need to stand, what we need to get. What the hell is our story? You've got to be thinking of that if you're starting out or making TV programmes and docs. What are we here to do and get? Can I carefully, gently, without squeezing them in an unacceptable way, get that from the person I'm talking to and gently tease it out? Sometimes they have to film for bloody hours, the poor lot, because I'm not going to drag it out of people instantly. I'm going to chat with them and draw it out, hopefully in a way that, well, maybe it makes me look personable, but honestly, that my family, I'm sure, would say I'm much more annoying than the average type. But thank you.
Must be a politician.
No, mate, that's a bad idea for us all. But thank you. Should we go? You tell me.
Yeah, there's a guy in the, I think it's the third or fourth row over there.
They're all blokes, aren't they? Come on, don't let it just be blokes. I can see blokes.
So
hello, bloke.
I have to deal with the BBC high risk team, which I'm sure you've dealt with as well. So I can confirm they are absolutely brilliant when it comes to kind of dangerous situations and how can you get in and out of them safely. My question though is around, when you started doing this, you were a relatively young guy, presumably didn't have a family. Now that you've got a partner, you've got a child, how does that change how you approach any of these things, if at all? And kind of how do they feel about what you do as well?
Thank you for that question. I imagine, the BBC has something called a high risk team, and it sounds a bit media cliche, but they're great, really. I mean, it's if you people are going to somewhere which is classed as being a properly hostile environment, quite rightly, the Beeb, as a sensible corporation now, employs people who are experts in risk to make a judgment on whether you're a complete muppet or whether you're capable of going to that place and representing the British National Broadcasting Corporation. So yeah, I've dealt with them more at arm's length. It's my team who mainly deal with that. I'm lucky I don't have to do the risk assessments. But yes, I wasn't that young actually when I started making telly. I would have been early 30s. I'd already spent nearly 14 years working in much more dangerous situations than almost all conventionally telly is filmed in. And on my own, researching books about ludicrously dodgy people and like an idiot trying to find the terrorist training camp in the jungle in South East. What on earth was I doing that? It's much more dangerous to do that on your own than having spoken to high risk and having that sort of conversation. My family, I think, are very understanding. It's always been, it's my job. They know I and we are careful and sensible. I'm not a junkie for adrenaline. I want to come home. I always wear a seatbelt, and as people I work with will attest, I'm nerdily insistent on that. Nobody is allowed to travel anywhere without one. It's slightly talismanic in the sense that I cling to that as a belief, but I know that our most important safety precautions is tyres with tread and seatbelts. Even in a war zone, armoured personnel carriers and tanks have seatbelts, for goodness sake, because of the risk of a traffic accident, seriously. So we are actually quite careful. I haven't reined it in, I don't think. After my lad was born, the first place we really went to was frontline Mogadishu again. But I'm careful and I believe, I do genuinely, in what we're doing, that there is some spurious justification for it. But I do worry about my responsibility to my family. But I think that box is hopefully adequately looked after, as it were, by the precautions we take and potentially the righteousness, I would say, of making programs which hopefully is teaching people a bit about these these places. But I want to come home as well, you know, and I care about my lads. So I am careful, but hopefully not too cautious, all right?
And there was a lady, I think just diagonally below you, who had a question. There we go.
Thank you.
Hello, thanks very much.
Hello.
My question was related to the first question about your early development. It was more about your literacy skills, because you described how you looked out of school and you didn't do well at school. But then at a very early age, you became a writer. So I was just wondering how you made that leap and how much you think that kind of literary skill, or not having it, is going to hold somebody back from getting into the media these days.
That's very interesting. So how on earth did I go from being a school dropout to writing, and how important is it now? I think, well, for me, goodness, I remember sitting next to the chief investigative reporter on the Sunday Times, whose name was Peter Howman. And for those who remember that time, he was central to the Mordecai Vanunu scoop, which in media terms was one of the great Fleet Street scoops, really, where the Sunday Times revealed Israel had nuclear weapons. And he was one of the only journalists I'd ever heard of before working in telly. And then by total luck and good fortune, he was really one of the central people who mentored me. And he asked me to write a story up that we'd worked on. And I sat next to him as he looked at it, and he sat back and he said, well, you know, there's 1,000 different ways to write a newspaper article. Brackets, this isn't really one of them. But he was really lovely and generous about it. And he showed me what I got wrong. And really, I think by being a bit of a sponge, through the process of osmosis, I picked up some of the key elements for structuring and storytelling. You know, I had very little in my head, really, I think. And so by being with people who knew how to do it, I learned. And I learned very, very quickly. Now, whether there was a sort of bit of innate ability in there, I honestly don't really know. If you look at my school record, you would think not. But is it environment or background? Is it you know, upbringing or DNA? I think probably I was put into an environment where there were some of the best journo writers around, and I was a sponge and learned quickly. But I was open to it, and I think that's really key. I didn't come with a sense of awareness and entitlement. You know, I wasn't reluctant or embarrassed about going, I know nothing, teach me. I asked questions, people were willing to pass that on, and I learned very quickly. Really rapidly, I was rewriting, as one of the editorial staff, other journalists' copy on the paper, because I was quite good at it. And so I think it was a willingness to learn, honestly, and being in an environment where I was hothoused into that. So it was a bit of a fast track, really, and absolutely does it matter now. And I've had conversations just today where I think it's evident that those basic fundamental skills in how to structure the most simplistic of journalistic story, there's a lack of those amongst people now, because partly many of those, that media is dying and it's not adequately being replaced, so people don't recognise the importance of it. Understanding headline, subheading, opening paragraph, a drop intro, the need to capture your readership, the need to be able to cut. Still today, I don't know if you agree, oh my God, the title, the heading of a newspaper article, the title of a TV series, the title of a book is so ludicrously critical to its commissioning and, come on, yes?
I agree. I mean,
and success, right? You need that, and people need to come to you with an elevator pitch you might have heard of, which is basically, wrap up please, it says, how to tell a short story quickly. Thank you for the question.
What was Wilderness called before we changed the title slot?
God, Earth's Wild Frontier. There was one.
Terrible. So we need to start wrapping up. So let's just conclude. Just two very quick wrap-up questions.
Yeah.
What are you working on at the moment? Number one, and number two, where should I go on holiday this summer?
Oh, come on.
Quick, just quick headline.
For where you should go, go where your heart is telling you, but do it responsibly and super sustainably. If you can, take the flipping train, which is a proper adventure. Go to Romania, which is brilliant. Oh, I've got this. Excellent! All right? Go to the Carpathian Mountains, which is true proper wilderness on the edge of Europe. You can get there with a couple of overnight trains and a proper adventure crossing the Hungarian border, and help to put your tourism money into an environment that needs you and will enjoy it, I'm sure, and is properly adventurous and magnificent. Or, just put the money back into the local community. I still totally believe in travel for the joys it can bring, but I recognise the damage that it delivers as well. What am I doing? I'm totally allowed to say, I think, because we just... we've the BBC's just announced 2 new commissions, which I'm incredibly honoured with regard to, but it was announced an hour and 50 minutes ago by the press office Instagram site. So we're making a series about Scandinavia, okay, a little whoop, all right, we're going to try and tell you things you don't know, I hope, about Scandinavia, like in terms of gun ownership. After Americans and Yemenis, Finns own more weapons per head of population than anywhere on the planet. You may be aware that the Norwegians are fantastically rich, but we're going to try and go and see their sovereign wealth fund and tell you how. We're going to try and show you things that you don't know about that part of the world. I don't want anyone coming up to me and saying Finland's not part of Scandinavia. This is telly, we're allowed to be flexible, all right, as long as we've got a good title. And for Jack, I'm thanking Jack, he has commissioned, he's a massive boss at the BBC, for goodness sake. He's commissioning me to go and the team to go and make 4 more wilderness programmes, a new series of wilderness, which we're going to film next year. Hopefully we'll have some tricky situations and magnificent, and we'll be able to show people watching the telly there is still a beautiful, amazing planet out there, and we'll be able to show you some other wilderness areas that are worth believing in and campaigning for. All right, that's what we're doing. Okay? Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. It's been a pleasure. We're honoured to have you working with us at the BBC. And thank you for being so frank, so funny and so entertaining.
I feel like I've been through therapy and a job interview. I'm quite shattered now.
It's not one of those podcasts like How to Fail, hasn't it?
Upwards, hopefully. But I've loved it. Thank you very much indeed, Joe. And can I have, please, a round of applause for Jack and for our magnificent BSL team. All right? And although I'm not going to humiliate them in front of all of you. Sam, who's down here in the front row, looking embarrassed with his legs crossed. Is that Jane next to him? No. All right. Sorry, I can't see properly. Is it Kate? Yeah. Oh my goodness! I just dropped a few years off your cake, so that's a good thing. They're down here, and I think John Hay, who's also very key involved in the programmes, is in here, and Jonathan Young, Sheffield Steel Finance at the back. We have a round of applause, please, for them. Is that Tom next to Sam? You can't bloody see anything. All right, well, thanks all. Thank you for being here. Lots of love. All right, cheers.